I believe there's a mood in the air which we don't detect often in Britain. It was there in 1945, after the sacrifice of war. And it's there again now. It's the determination that our collective sacrifice must lead to a better future.
Hello and welcome to another TLDR UK video. Keir Starmer has been leading the Labour Party for over a year now, and despite getting off to a decent start, he's been trailing Johnson when it comes to approval ratings, with his personal approval falling off a cliff recently. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Starmer and the Labour Party he's running, exploring what the Labour Party's policies actually are, because, well, no one seems to really know. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Currently, about 60% of you haven't made the leap, so go for it. Also, we never tell people to like our videos, and, well, we're curious what difference it would make. So chuck us a like, and we'll see if it does anything. Thanks. Anyway, on to the video. A common criticism of Keir Starmer recently is that it's not clear what he stands for, and this is at least in part because no one knows what his policies are. Now, to be fair to Starmer, the next general election isn't for a few years, so it's not like Labour needs to produce a manifesto ASAP. But it is true that Labour haven't been great at communicating the few policies they have.
Have you guys sat down yet and decided what policy? Have you spoken to Keir Starmer? Have you sat in a room and gone, right, guys, what does the Labour Party stand for? Have you had that conversation yet?
Well, of course we have our shadow ministerial,
So
our shadow cabinet meeting.
Can you share it with us then? What does the Labour Party now stand for?
I can't. They're confidential meetings. I can't.
Confidential meetings? You're a political.
Share it with voters at some point.
It's very clear. The Labour Party is.
This is likely deliberate for some policies, because Labour probably still haven't decided what sort of policy platform they want to have in the next general elections, so don't want to commit too heavily towards a certain specific set of policy platforms, but it's unlikely that they don't want anyone to know anything about any of their policies, which is pretty much what's happened. So in this video we're going to be taking a look at Labour's policy in three key areas: welfare, the environment, and tuition fees. Let's start with welfare. Labour actually has a pretty detailed welfare policy platform, released in December of last year. Labour essentially wants to reform the universal credit system, which was introduced by the Conservatives in 2012. Universal credit is basically a simplified system which bundled together 6 separate benefits into one single benefit. As of 2019, 2.5 million people were receiving universal credit. Of those 2.5 million, 65% were unemployed, and the remaining 35% were in low-income households. By March of this year, thanks to the pandemic, this figure has jumped to 6 million claimants. Anyway, Labour want to do 3 things to change the current universal credit system. Firstly, they want to scrap the 5-week wait. Basically, the first time you claim universal credit, you have to wait 5 weeks before your first payment. And Labour want to scrap this so that you can receive your benefits immediately. Secondly, they want to scrap the 2-child limit. As the name suggests, the 2-child limit says that you can only claim child benefits for your first 2 children, but not for your third. Thirdly, they want to scrap the savings limit and suspend the benefits cap. As things stand, you can't claim universal credit if you have savings of more than £16,000, and there's an upper limit to how much you can claim, which varies depending on your relationship status and whether you live in London. Labour want to scrap the savings limit entirely and temporarily suspend the benefit cap until the worst of the pandemic is sorted out. Analysis by the House of Commons Library found that the plans would cost £3 billion and raise 600,000 people, including 360,000 children, out of relative poverty. And it's worth noting here that the number of children who are living in relative poverty in the UK has been slowly increasing since 2011. So that's Labour's welfare policy, but what about environment? Well, Labour don't have an explicit policy position, but it's pretty easy to infer, because one of Starmer's favourite talking points is a Green New Deal. And while Labour hasn't quite published a Green New Deal since Starmer took over, Starmer did publish a plan for a green economic recovery with a focus on creating green jobs back in November. The plan involved a £30 billion investment in low-carbon sectors over the next 18 months, which would apparently create 400,000 new jobs, accompanied by an emergency retraining program to help train people for those green jobs. Labour also proposed a national investment bank to channel investment into green technology, and a national nature service, which would focus on conservation projects. Now, it's fair to say that this isn't the most detailed policy proposal ever, but again, those kind of details are only likely to emerge in manifesto season. Alright, so finally, let's talk about Labour's position on education. Here, Starmer's pretty much just continuing with Corbyn's 2019 policies. Starmer said that he would keep Corbyn's policy of scrapping tuition fees and reintroducing student maintenance grants. And Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green, has endorsed Corbyn's National Education Service. Labour's position on tuition fees is actually pretty popular. Recent polling by BMG found that only 18% of the British public support the current fee regime of £9,250 a year, with 34% in favour of a £3,000 fee and 31% in favour of scrapping them entirely. In 2019, the policy was costed at £7.2 billion a year, but there's an argument to be made that it will save the taxpayer money in the long term. Considering that more than half of young people are going to university these days, but the IFS only expects that less than half of student loans will be paid back in the end, which will mean that the taxpayer will have to end up covering the rest. If you instead had no tuition fees, but fewer people got into university, then you could actually end up costing the taxpayer less money. We're not saying that scrapping tuition fees is necessarily better than the current system, just that the current system is also very expensive. If you want to know more about this, we actually did a full video on it a while ago. The National Education Service, which was in both the 2017 and 2019 Labour manifestos, is a free at point of use education service, supposedly something like the NHS. In practice, this would probably mean spending a lot more money on the education system, and some sort of free retraining for adults over the age of 18. This is, at least in principle, a pretty good idea. The UK is currently really bad at retraining, and it definitely hurts our productivity when compared to other countries. Anyway, those are Starmer's key policies. Some pretty serious welfare support increases, a green recovery focused on new high-quality jobs, and some old-school Corbyn education policies.
And I think with the vaccine rollout, now is the time to answer that fundamental question. Do we go back to business as usual and patch up what we had before, to which I say no, or do we go forward to a better, more secure future, an economy where we deal with the underlying inequalities and injustices in our economy and in our society?
What do you think of this platform? Do you think that this is enough to make you vote Labour? Or do you see major issues with this strategy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.